The lullaby that changed everything. The clock struck midnight as Marcus Thornfield pressed his face against the cold glass of his penthouse window, watching the city lights blur through his exhausted tears. Behind him, his 3-year-old daughter Emma's cries echoed through the marble halls of their luxurious home, a sound that had become as constant as his own heartbeat over the past 6 months. He was worth $300 million, commanded boardrooms filled with the most powerful executives in the country, yet he couldn't get his own daughter to sleep through a single night. If this story moves you, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, comment below with your thoughts, and don't forget to subscribe to Trillionaire in Love for more heartwarming stories that remind us what truly matters in life. Marcus had tried everything money could buy: sleep consultants who charged $5,000 for a single session, custom-made cribs designed by European artisans, white noise machines that cost more than most people's monthly rent, pediatricians, child psychologists, even a feng shui expert who rearranged Emma's nursery according to ancient principles. Nothing worked. Emma would fall asleep for an hour, maybe 2 if he was lucky, then wake up screaming as if trapped in some invisible nightmare that no amount of wealth could chase away. The irony wasn't lost on him. 6 months ago, he had been on top of the world. His tech company had just gone public, making him one of the youngest self-made billionaires in history. The same week the stock hit its peak, his wife Sarah had been diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. She fought for 4 months with the same determination that had made her a successful attorney, but even the best oncologist's money couldn't save her. She passed away just as Emma was learning to say mama, leaving Marcus alone in a 30,000 square foot house that suddenly felt smaller than a coffin. That's when Emma stopped sleeping. The doctors said it was trauma, that children could sense grief even when they couldn't understand it. They prescribed sleep aids that Marcus was too afraid to use on someone so small. They suggested therapy for a toddler who could barely form complete sentences. They talked about adjustment periods and develop mental phases, but Marcus knew the truth. Emma was crying for her mother, and no medical degree could heal that kind of loss. Tonight was particularly brutal. Marcus had been in board meetings all day, trying to prevent a hostile takeover that threatened to destroy everything he and Sarah had built together. He'd rushed home at 6, dismissed the nanny, and spent the past 6 hours walking the halls with Emma in his arms. His shirt was soaked with her tears and his own sweat. His back ached from the constant rocking. His voice was hoarse from singing every lullaby he could remember, though his business, hardened baritone seemed to only make her cry harder. As Emma's wails reached a new crescendo, Marcus heard something that made him freeze in the hallway. Another voice, soft and melodic, drifting through the walls. Someone was singing. He followed the sound to Emma's nursery window, which overlooked the small apartment building next door. There, on a fire escape barely 20 feet away, sat a young girl who couldn't have been more than 16. She was singing in Spanish, her voice carrying a warmth that seemed to wrap around Marcus's exhausted heart like a gentle embrace. Emma had stopped crying. For the first time in months, she was completely quiet. Her small body relaxed against his chest as she listened to the mysterious voice floating through the night air. Marcus hardly dared to breathe, afraid that any movement might break whatever spell had finally brought his daughter peace. The girl on the fire escape was Maria Santos, though Marcus didn't know her name yet. She was the eldest of 4 children, living in a cramped 2-bedroom apartment with her mother, who worked double shifts at the hospital, laundry, and her father, who cleaned office buildings downtown. Maria had been singing her younger siblings to sleep for years, a responsibility that had fallen to her when her parents' work schedules left them exhausted and emotionally drained. She discovered that her voice had a magic quality, able to soothe crying babies and chase away the nightmares that came with growing up in poverty. Tonight, Maria had been unable to sleep herself. The stress of balancing high school, a part-time job at the local grocery store, and caring for her siblings was weighing heavily on her 17-year-old shoulders. She'd climbed out onto the fire escape for some fresh air and had heard the crying from the penthouse next door. Without thinking, she'd started singing one of the lullabies her grandmother had taught her, a gentle Mexican folk song about angels watching over children in their dreams. She had no idea that her voice was reaching across the gap between two very different worlds, bringing the first moment of peace a grieving billionaire had known in months. Marcus stood at the window for nearly an hour, watching this young stranger sing his daughter to sleep. Emma's breathing had deepened, her small fist unclenched, and for the first time since Sarah's death, she looked truly peaceful. When the girl finally went back inside, Marcus carefully carried Emma to her crib and watched in amazement as she stayed asleep. The next morning brought a crisis at the office that required Marcus's immediate attention, but all he could think about was the voice that had saved his sanity. He found himself rushing home early, hoping to catch another glimpse of the girl who had given him something no amount of money could buy. That evening, as if summoned by his desperate hope, the crying started again, and once more, the voice from the fire escape provided the miracle he needed. This pattern continued for a week. Marcus began to structure his entire day around those precious moments when Emma would finally rest. He started researching his neighbors, learning about the Santos family through property records and news articles. He discovered that Maria was an honor roll student despite working 20 hours a week to help support her family. Her younger brother had been diagnosed with asthma, and the medical bills were crushing. Her parents were considering moving to a cheaper neighborhood, which would mean Maria would have to change schools in her senior year. Marcus realized he was facing an ethical dilemma that no business school had prepared him for. He needed this girl's voice to help his daughter sleep, but he couldn't simply buy her services like he would any other commodity. This wasn't a business transaction. This was human kindness freely given, and somehow monetizing it felt like it would destroy whatever magic made it work. The decision was made for him on a rainy Thursday night. Emma had been crying for 3 hours straight, and the singing from next door had stopped abruptly. Marcus heard shouting in Spanish, the sound of doors slamming, and then silence. Emma continued to scream, but no gentle voice came to her rescue. The next morning, Marcus learned that the Santos family had received an eviction notice. They had fallen behind on rent after Maria's brother's emergency room visit the previous month. They had 3 days to come up with the money or find a new place to live. Marcus stood in his marble foyer, holding his still, crying daughter, and realized that all his wealth meant nothing if he couldn't help the one person who had helped him when he needed it most. But he also knew that simply writing a check wouldn't solve the deeper problem. The Santos family needed more than money. They needed opportunity, dignity, and hope for a future beyond just surviving from paycheck to paycheck. That afternoon, Marcus did something he hadn't done since before Sarah's death. He knocked on a neighbor's door. Maria answered, her eyes widening in recognition and embarrassment. She'd seen him watching from his window and was mortified that her family's problems might have disturbed the wealthy man next door. What followed was one of the most important conversations of Marcus's life. He told Maria about Emma, about Sarah, about the sleepless nights that had nearly broken him. Maria told him about her family, her dreams of becoming a music teacher, her fear of losing the only home her younger siblings had ever known. They talked for 2 hours while Emma slept peacefully in Maria's arms, responding to the same voice that had been her salvation for weeks. By the end of that conversation, Marcus had offered Maria something far more valuable than money. He offered her a full scholarship to any music program in the country, along with a job helping other families dealing with childhood sleep issues. He offered her parents steady work with his company's facilities management division, complete with health insurance that would cover her brother's medical needs. Most importantly, he offered to purchase their apartment building and renovate it into affordable housing for working families, ensuring they would never face eviction again. But Maria surprised him with her response. She didn't want charity, even from someone whose daughter she'd helped. She wanted to earn these opportunities, so they struck a different kind of deal. Maria would spend her evenings helping Emma transition to sleeping on her own, using her natural gift to train other caregivers in the household. In exchange, Marcus would fund her education and provide her family with the stability they needed, but structured as employment rather than handouts. The transformation that followed was remarkable. Within a month, Emma was sleeping through the night consistently. Maria discovered she had a genuine talent for helping children with sleep disorders and began developing techniques that combined traditional lullabies with modern sleep science. Marcus found himself rediscovering the joy of fatherhood, no longer too exhausted to truly connect with his daughter. More importantly, both families found something they'd been missing since their losses. The Santos family found security and hope for the future. Marcus and Emma found that family didn't have to be defined by blood or wealth, but by the people who showed up during your darkest moments and refused to let you face them alone. 6 months later, Marcus stood once again at his penthouse window, but this time he wasn't crying. Below, he could see Maria teaching a group of neighborhood children how to sing, their voices mixing together in harmony as they prepared for a community concert. Emma was napping peacefully in her room, no longer needing a lullaby to chase away her fears. The hostile takeover had failed. His company was stronger than ever. But Marcus had learned that his greatest success wasn't measured in stock prices or quarterly earnings. It was measured in the sound of his daughter's laughter, in the knowledge that he'd helped a talented young woman achieve her dreams, and in the understanding that sometimes the most valuable things in life come from the most unexpected places. Maria went on to study music therapy, specializing in helping children cope with trauma and loss. She opened a clinic that served families regardless of their ability to pay, funded by a foundation that Marcus established in Sarah's memory. Emma grew up bilingual, learning Spanish from Maria, and understanding from an early age that real wealth comes from the connections we make with others. The building that once housed a struggling immigrant family became a model for affordable housing, providing stable homes for dozens of working families. Marcus discovered that using his wealth to create opportunities rather than just accumulating more money brought him a satisfaction he'd never found in any boardroom. Years later, when Emma was old enough to understand the story, Marcus would tell her about the night a stranger's voice saved them both. He would explain how sometimes our greatest challenges lead us to our greatest blessings, and how the barriers we think separate us from others are often just illusions waiting to be broken down by simple acts of human kindness. The lullaby that had brought them together became more than just a song. It became a reminder that in a world that often feels divided by money, status, and circumstance, we're all just human beings trying to find peace, comfort, and connection. Sometimes that connection comes from the most unexpected places, carried on the voice of a teenager singing on a fire escape, reaching across the darkness to touch a broken father's heart. Maria still sings, though now it's to rooms full of children whose parents have found hope in her gentle voice and innovative techniques. Marcus still works long hours, but he never misses bedtime, and he's learned that the most important negotiations happen not in conference rooms, but in the quiet moments when we choose to open our hearts to the people around us. The penthouse is quieter now, filled with the peaceful sounds of a child who sleeps soundly, knowing she is loved and safe. But sometimes, when the windows are open and the night air carries sounds from the street below, you can still hear voices singing in Spanish, English, and a dozen other languages, all sharing the universal lullaby that reminds us we're never truly alone. This story reminds us that sometimes our deepest pain can lead to our greatest connections, and that the help we need most might come from the most unexpected sources. Love, kindness, and human connection don't recognize the boundaries we think separate us. They transcend wealth, status, and circumstance to create bonds that can transform lives in ways we never imagined possible. If this story touched your heart, Please like this video to help us share it with others who might need to hear this message. Share it with someone who believes in the power of human kindness. Leave a comment below telling us about a time when an unexpected connection changed your life. And subscribe to Trillionaire in Love for more stories that celebrate the beautiful ways we find each other in this complex world. Remember, we're all just voices in the darkness, waiting for someone to hear our song.